You are writing a story with your life, and it's interwoven with my story. Let's make it a real page turner. Sometimes we may laugh, and sometimes we may cry, but we can face whatever may come because we have faith for the journey, hope for the future, and love for those who are drawn onward with us through the story. I'm Teresa Janzen, and this is Drawn Onward. Hello, and welcome to Drawn Onward. Today, I have with me a special guest, Christine Trimpe, who is another one of the contributing authors to She Writes for Him, Stories of Living Hope. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you today and to be in this book with you, The Stories of Living Hope.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And as I've been working through interviewing many of the authors in the book, I'm just amazed at how our stories just come together to display God's hope, but also are so powerful each individually. So I can't wait to dive into yours a little bit here today. Why don't you just start us off by telling us a little bit about your background and maybe how you came to faith?
Well, I was raised in a Christian church or Christian home, I should say. I was raised in a Christian home. My parents are Christians, lifelong believers. And I became saved at my Tuesday after school Bible study programs in elementary school. I can remember I'm like a type A personality, so I was always the girl that was raising her hand every Tuesday. I wanted to make extra sure that I was saved, right? Well, I was active and participant in my youth group and everything going through high school, but when I left home to go away to college, I was the statistic of the church raised girl who basically left the church, didn't pursue any activity with trying to find a church, didn't hang out with a Christian fellowship group in college or anything like that. So at that time of my life, I can identify myself more as a cultural Christian. And I wasn't established enough in my faith to realize at the time that I never really had a deep and intimate relationship with Christ. And even though I did all the right things by trying to get my kids into church, I did that off and on throughout the years. But I left, the upbringing of my children's faith to the church. And it wasn't until recent years that I really developed a deep and abiding relationship with Christ and realized that that is like the main thing that I had been missing out on my entire life. So,
Wow. Well, the Lord has been faithful in his
mhm.
journey with you, though. Do you feel like those years, though, in the church when you were a child, was that instrumental in bringing you back to the faith, or was it really just a completely different experience for you?
Oh, no, I definitely think it laid a very solid foundation, especially since my parents were Christians. And, I always grew up watching my dad read his Bible every morning. And then my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a deep man of faith. And I just always wanted to make sure I was making them proud, making them all proud, by doing the right things. But it was more of my actions and just controlling what I was doing in life. And I never like I said, I never understood like the deep relationship that came out of knowing Jesus through his word and
Mhm.
just building that relationship. So I was just basically a doer, and I wasn't a close person at the time. So the
Yeah.
foundation is key to my story because like you said, God has always been faithful. And so I when I look back on all those decades of not walking with him, he was definitely protecting me through so many things in those seasons. And he's always been for me. And he was just waiting for me to reach up my hand and say, you got to help me, pull me up out of this pit. So,
One of the areas that I write on is for parents of adult children, and specifically those who are
mm,
either emotionally or geographically distant. And so that's why I'm interested in this
yeah.
topic. So let me test the statistics just a little bit. Are you an oldest child or an oldest girl child in your family?
Yes, both.
Yeah, well, you fit the
I'm the
mold.
oldest child, oldest daughter. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, when you
Yes.
talk about things like doing the right thing, wanting to make them proud, those types of things,
Hmm.
I can really relate to that. That is how I was
Mm,
growing up, and that is oftentimes that oldest child thing. And so I think it's really hard. in my experience at least, it's harder to come to faith because you've spent so much time looking like you're there, like you have it all together and trying to make people
Mm,
proud. And coming to faith
yes.
is all about surrendering and giving up the facade. So
Yes. Wow,
it
that's
can
very
take
astute. Yes. You just
yeah.
about nailed my testimony right there.
Well,
Right.
I we share that, I'll tell you.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about how writing became part of your life, and maybe specifically how the She Writes for Him Stories of Living Hope project came into your life.
Well, going back to the moment that Jesus picked me up out of the pit, I had a lot of chronic health issues at that time. When I was approaching the age of 50, I started getting desperate for healing because I was over 100 pounds overweight. I suffered from sleep apnea and fatty liver disease, and I was chronically exhausted, which led me to being a chronically crabby person. And I was getting to the point where I couldn't do things. My husband and I went on a trip for our anniversary, and I was unable to go up the mountain trails with him. And so at that time, I just became really desperate. And I had no other choice but to, you know, dig into the foundation of the faith that I had and just ask God for healing. I wanted to feel better. It kind of scared me thinking about an early death. I wanted to be
Mhm.
around for my grandchildren. And so when I cried out to him, like just these amazing things, amazing series of events started happening in my life. I did start battling my obesity. I did start becoming an overcomer in that because I finally got to the point of surrender. And he taught me about surrender. And one of the biggest things I had to surrender was my addiction to carbohydrates and sugar and food. And as I began to, really recognize the importance of that and how deep and intimate that was of a process with Jesus, he started building this story in my life. And when you lose weight, it's an obvious change. It's an obvious physical transformation. And so a lot of people started asking me like, how did you do this? And it got to the point where I was like sitting down and having coffee with people all the time, and I love doing that. It's like having a coffee connection with, it's just a beautiful thing. But it got to the point where I couldn't meet with everybody all the time because I had a full-time job as well too, and I'm taking care of my family and things like that. So, and my family kept encouraging me to start a blog. And I'm like, I'm an accountant. I'm not a writer. What do you mean start a blog? And more people just kept saying it. And so I started a little Facebook group called Sugar is the Devil, and got a bunch of people interested in that. And it just kind of grew from there to a blog on the internet, and writing and posting things there and just trying to help people and encourage people. And the blog was specifically focused on my lifestyle at the time, which I chose a ketogenic and intermittent fasting way of life. But I always put sneaky Jesus in there because as he was putting me through this journey, it was the best part of my healing was the spiritual transformation and the emotional healing that he's brought me through. But I was so happy to, have this great story of a weight loss transformation that I can share the hope of healing, through my story with people. So I started the blog, started writing, um, eventually came to the She Writes for Him conference that I'm not sure if you attended the conference, but through
Yeah.
that, I joined the She Writes for Him tribe and get a lot of encouragement and teaching on how to be a writer because like I said, I'm an accountant. But I've been writing since April 2018 when I started the blog, and it's just kind of fully developed into working on 2 books right now and staying engaged in the tribe, writing mini blogs, things like that every day. So it's been a very fun. I just keep saying God is so much fun because who would have ever imagined that he would call me to write and speak, call me out of my corner office in a corporate building as an accountant and saying, now you're going to write and speak. I mean, that's just crazy. It's crazy to me, but here I am.
Right. It is
Yeah.
crazy. It is
Yes.
because people
Yeah.
equate accountants with writers and speakers, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm really
Yes.
interested in this connection between your physical transformation and your spiritual, emotional transformation. And how has
Mhm.
that played out when you've shared your testimony with other people? Are
Mhm.
other people also finding that connection between the physical health, and
Mhm.
especially when you talk about food as an addiction, or especially sugar as an addiction,
Mhm.
and it
Mhm.
is a powerful drug that people don't even recognize.
Right. Well, I've had recently an amazing response to an offer that I put out to help women start the 2021. Like everybody wants to get healthy in the new year, right? And I don't like resolutions. I prefer to focus on life transformations. And I put out an offer to help women in 21 days. Like they say, it takes 21 days to start forming a new habit. So we started this group in January, and it was amazing to see, as I shared my testimony and shared my story, it was amazing to see the testimonies come out of those 21 days from women, like with their light bulb moments and saying, I fully now understand that everything is so intertwined, the way God created us perfectly. And I tried to take them through the similar process that I went through, where I made choices and then I had to decide what I was going to surrender and what that sacrifice looked like in my life. And then finally, making going through those steps, getting to the sanctification process that continues. I'm always going to be walking that sanctification journey with Jesus. But it was just so beautiful to see them finally. A lot of them are like, wow, it's completely amazing. I shared a lot of scripture with them, and just try to put all the pieces together. And part of my testimony is that I tried to do everything on my own power for so many years. For 3 decades, I did the Weight Watchers. I counted the calories. I moved more. I ate less. I did all kinds of programs, and it was me just trying to tick off the boxes of being successful. Oh, I stayed under my 1,200 calories today. And that just took me through years of yo-yo dieting, trying to do everything in my own power. But yeah, God is for us in our health, our whole health, body, mind, heart, and soul, and He's constantly wooing us. And as I look back, I can see He was constantly wooing me, to follow Him for a healthy and holy lifestyle.
And I love how
Hmm.
you have equated that, you know, all it could be any area of your life where you're just trying to do the right thing and
Right.
do it in your
Hmm.
own power. It could be anything, not just
Hmm.
food or health issues. And surrendering that, because God is the only one who is capable of doing these things for us. And then using the story, that's just
Right.
amazing. And that you're able to communicate
Yeah.
that to people. So tell me a little
Hmm.
bit more
Yeah.
about your ministry. Do you have other books, or is this your first book in publication?
The Stories of Living Hope is the first time I've ever been published in publication, so that's super exciting, and I loved it because it was like I'm in the process of writing my first book about my journey. It's a nonfiction, and it's about my physical, emotional, and spiritual transformation. And so when they said, "Do you want to be part of this book?" Yeah, I can write 1,500 words and get published. That's, because I'm trying to trudge through this other book. And the thing about that is that God's been, from the very beginning of when I started that book, God has been still developing it. So it's okay that it's not published yet, even though I've been working on it for a while. So yeah, it was my first publication. And then I have two other books in process, and one with Redemption Press and one with United House Publishing. And super excited. Hopefully, they will both be published by the end of 2021 as well.
Okay, that is
Hmm.
exciting. So if people
Hmm.
want to connect with you and
Hmm.
hear more about your writing journey and about your ministry and helping people with both physical, emotional, spiritual transformation,
Hmm.
how can they connect with you? Do you have your website, your blog?
Yes, I have my ministry website is my name, christinetrimpe.com, and that's mostly where I talk about the healthy, holy living. And then I also have a lifestyle blog called Joyful Keto Life. and that was the original blog that I started to share, the tips and tricks about following a keto lifestyle and weight loss and fasting and things like that. And both of those websites have all my social media links on there too, on different ways that people can connect with me. Mhm.
Okay. Now, I have one question for you since you're an expert in this area. And intermittent fasting is really popular right now,
Mhm.
and there's a
Mhm.
lot of talk out there about it. How do you
Mhm.
connect fasting for health, and or do you fasting for health versus spiritual fasting,
Mm.
like what's described in the Bible?
Yeah, I love that because when I was a cultural Christian and people in my church were talking about fasting, I used to think, how in the world can they do that? It was like, how can they go without food for so long? And once God revealed to me, my addiction to sugar and carbohydrates and food, and I began the process of surrendering that and separating myself from that. I What I write about in this book is about my food addiction and how I finally realized that I had so many holes in my soul that I was filling with food and sugar. And the fasting has been such a powerful tool of connection with God, because in those moments when I feel like I need to fill myself with something, it used to be food, and that used to be my go to. But now, the time that I spend in fasting is mostly spiritual, because I, it's okay that we deny ourselves things sometimes, and it's okay that draws, for me personally, that drew me much closer to the Lord, because in those moments I would run to him, and I would run to my Bible, or I would run to worship music, or I would run to prayer, and just ask him to continue to sanctify me, for his glory, and to build his message that he wants to share through my story. And so, yeah, I love fasting. I share with people, even the people in the secular world. I always try to put the sneaky Jesus in it, and talk about fasting as a spiritual practice too. And then of course, that's one of the things that I talk about a lot with my audience, is how deeply connected you can become with Jesus and his word when you spend time in fasting and prayer. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
anything we can
Hmm.
pray for you for, or any final words that you would have for our listeners before we go?
Well, you can pray for me because I just quit my corporate career that I talked about, being an accountant in the corner. I just quit my corporate career on Monday for many reasons, but it was mostly through a period of fasting and praying, and what God has brought me through the past couple of months. And just that last week, I had a major breakthrough with him, through a period of fasting, on the direction that he wants me to take with my life. And it's no longer going to be in corporate America. So if you could pray for me for that, that would be amazing. Because I have absolutely no idea what the financial future is going to look like, or, things like that. But that's not for me to worry about. And I finally got to that point in my life, right?
Wow, another
Yes.
surrender, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
well, we
Mhm,
will definitely pray for you with that. And let me just
mhm.
show that this is the book. She writes for him. Oh, there we go. She
Yes,
writes for him. Stories of Living Hope. Do you have yours there?
I
Yay!
do. Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm excited about the book actually being released to the public here coming up very shortly. And
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm,
so thank you for being a part of this journey. And I like to talk about how all of our stories are interconnected. And every time I talk
mhm.
to someone in the book, I can see God's redemptive story woven throughout each of our stories. And so thank you
Yeah,
for
that's
being with us today. Oh,
thank you for having me, Teresa.
Drawn Onward is more than an amazing palindrome. It's a production of TeresaJanzen.com.